Hey everybody, welcome back to another Bitwave Quick Hits where we discuss the latest happenings in the crypto space in 5 minutes or less, maybe 10 minutes or less.
We started
got
out at
Pat.
2 minutes or less, but howdy, did we not stay there very long?
I know, right? It's hey, we say we try, right? We try.
Yeah.
We'll just keep moving the goalpost. Pat, something that I've seen a lot on all over the internet. There's this debate of was crypto just kind of this passing fad, because it feels like VCs and just consumers have sort of moved on to the new shiny new thing, which is AI. So
Yeah.
there's this debate of blockchain versus AI. And I wanted to get you on here real quick because you told a super interesting story about an experience you had this week.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that we're seeing is VC capital moving to the next trend. And this is the way the world works. Like every 5 to 10 years, VC capital moves to the next trend. It doesn't count for something like some people that invest in Bitwave, like BCAP, blockchain capital. They're great and they're very focused on one particular vertical. And we're now starting to see verticalized AI focused VCs pop up. And actually, we're seeing some of the blockchain guys get into AI as well because there's overlap there. So it's the market is a really interesting one. So I always say don't read too much into the shift of how VC money is getting deployed, and there's a lot of dynamics that are not directly related to the markets. Now, all that being said, like AI is obviously the generative AI is the big thing right now. And this is the second phase of major AI investment. So people, again, if you don't spend a lot of time in the VC world, you might not see that in the startup world. There was a big heavy phase of AI investment 10 years ago. That was really the AI has kind of sandwiched blockchain in some ways, which is that there was categorization and classification AI investment, big data classification AI investment in like the early 2010s, something around there. That then all that money moved over to blockchain. And then now it's moving back to generative AI, which is the AI that we all know and love that makes, pretty pictures from words or talks to you about its most deepest desires as a computer and freaks us all out about computers destroying the world. And so it's like this is not even like the first time AI has been one of the major trends around crypto, around VC. Now, the experience I had, which was super interesting, was that I was as a founder and as I'm not the number one salesperson, but I do a lot of selling for Bitwave. I go to a lot of networking events, and the other night I was at a networking event that was ostensibly blockchain and AI. So it was put on by Hedera, who's a customer of Bitwaves, and we love them. They're great guys and gals. And so we were at this event. And they had basically 4 different talks. And the Hedera one was like maybe half an hour, and Christian, who's their head of marketing, did a great job talking about blockchain. The rest of the entire time was about AI. Everything else was about AI. And they had a panel with VCs about AI. And so the thing that's really funny is like at some point I started getting a little bit, I don't know if sick is the right word, but you go to enough crypto events, and crypto events are this outpouring of exuberant hope in the future and like this outpouring of people believing that crypto is going to fundamentally change the world, which is it's in retrospect, it's really nice and it's really refreshing. At the time, you're like, there's maybe a little bit more eye rolling than I'd like to always admit. But I got to this event and we're talking about it, and there wasn't anyone like. The only people that talked about the world changing were people that were worried about AI destroying the world. Everyone else that was talking about AI was talking about really traditional, VC ways of looking at the world, which is, what are your moats? How are you going to defend yourself? Like someone spent 10 minutes talking about data moats for VC for AI, which is like, what data do you have that no one else has that then can give you a competitive advantage? Yeah. It's such a weird way to look at the world. Like to go from crypto conferences where everyone is so excited. Like blockchain is necessarily a very collaborative field. I mean, it really is. Yeah. Everything is about it's all about financial building blocks. Like what is the base what's the base protocol that leads to the base smart contract that leads to the base dApp that leads to an enterprise app like Bitwave builds here. And it's the stacking of open protocols that's become so amazing. And I get to the AI conference, and 80% of the conversation is about moats and competitive advantages and closed ecosystems. And it made me, it was really funny that it actually made me almost nostalgic for the overload of hopium that crypto conferences
Yeah.
directly inject into your veins when you go to them. But it's a big difference. It honestly is a big difference between like the AI as a really point solution to solve interesting problems, but ultimately like to be closed ecosystem and really to get a lot of people fired in one way. Like AI is all like the current wave of generative AI in the perfect world is that money is going to move from uh travel agents and customer support agents and people that pick up phones and people that answer phones, and all that's going to move to tech companies that are kind of doing this. And that's sort of like level one. Level two is you're going to see these necessarily closed gardens of incredibly expensive data for competitive advantages from companies like, you know, KPMG or Deloitte or something like that. Like you can absolutely imagine a hedge fund paying $1 billion for a data set that's going to give them a 3% competitive advantage, right? Like that's
Yeah.
almost hard to imagine, but that's the world we're coming into. And I had someone that I talked to had a great analogy here, which is like at some point you're the money, the people that have the best AI will have a distinct competitive advantage in marketplaces. And that could be
Mhm.
executives who are just like living their lives, who have great access to AI, to generative AI like this. Could be businesses that are making financial investing decisions, whatever it is. So it's this shift from this like really, really open ecosystem that's all about enabling new methodologies and enabling new financial instruments, and enabling access,
Mhm.
whether it be for businesses or for individuals, to sophisticated financial instruments, to the shift of like, how do we maximize the amount of money we can get from these walled gardens and lock everyone in and stuff like that. It was
Yeah.
really shock. It was very shocking to me to watch that and be like, oh my God, this is a return. This is a direct return to the last time I was at a VC meetup like this before Bitwave, which was in the Web 2 era, where they're talking about the same thing. It was like Twitter. How do you lock in
Yeah.
Twitter versus Facebook? How do you lock users in? How do you
Yeah.
maximize the monetization of the user of the eyeballs? Like it's not about open connectivity. It's about locking folks in. So it's
What's
really
interesting is, like, as you were saying that, I literally thought this is just a move back to Web 2, right?
yep,
Because if you think about, like, what's the product with Web 2? If you think about Facebook, if you think about Google, it's data.
right.
It's what data do you have? And then it's how many eyeballs do you have? What data do you have? Turning around and selling that data or advertising. Um, and
Yep.
I've seen that with AI as well, right? It's, hey, how can we leverage this technology to extract data? Where I think blockchain is like, how do we distribute data, right? How do we make things more open source? And how
Well,
do
and,
we
and
break
blockchain is
down the wall?
ultimately very capabilities driven. Like, how do I
Yeah.
earn yield on I have USD sitting around and my bank is giving me 0.01% interest. How do I earn more interest on this? And maybe there was a lot of scams between point A and point B here, but it still is like, is this very capabilities? Like, what can I do with this? What can I enable? As opposed to like, what's the little moat that I can build on the data set? Or like, how can I monetize Pat because he looks at nice cars and this guy doesn't look at nice cars,
Yeah.
and I can get more money out of this guy? Or how can I monetize the combined knowledge of all of history by putting, you know, all the scientific papers into
Yeah.
AI? You know, it's really interesting. It's not to say that there's not value in it, but it is a very it's a very big departure from like what we've all. It got me really excited about crypto again. Like it actually really did get me excited about crypto
Yeah.
again, because it got me thinking about how we are still all fundamentally trying to work on, you know, changing the world here. And everyone, like, it sounds corny, but when people stop talking about it, it actually sounds better. It's one of those things, like, it sounds better in retrospect. When everyone's talking about changing the world, so you go to a place where no one cares about changing the world and everyone just cares about how much money they can make from their tech. Like, oh wait, maybe a little bit more world changing would be actually good.
Totally. Which leads me to an interesting question. Is there a world where blockchain and, you can say, Web3 as a greater umbrella term, and AI coexist?
Yeah, yeah.
And what does that look like?
I mean, I think it looks like companies like Bitwave. What's happened with Web3 is this enormous increase in the amount of data, financial data in this case, that like you just couldn't have before. There's only so many wires you can send in a day. Like just purely
Yeah.
in the financial system, there's so many wires because a lot of it's handled manually. There are, the way our bank works, there's a dude that punches in the stuff into the terminal that actually does that when wires happen. There's only something you can do a day. And something with crypto, people are doing 100 million transactions a month without even blinking. The overall volume of transactions is in the trillions per year. And so the only way you can really deal with that, like for Bitwave, like we are, building out lots of AI capabilities because the only way you can deal with that at scale is through AI. Now, it's not necessarily the generative AI that we're used to these days. It's more like the old school. But the generative AI comes into play of like how do you enable people to understand this and ask questions of the data and stuff like that. So it's a super interesting time for all of this. It is a really
Yeah.
interesting time, but but the other thing that I always mention is that during these transition periods, there's always a every single startup phase, every single like VC trend has had grifters in it. Like that's just the way it works. Like anyone,
Totally.
if like MedTech had Elizabeth Holmes, everyone has had this. So the only thing I'll mention here is I do get very skeptical when someone's pitch deck or someone is talking about their startup that's AI plus blockchain. Like AI plus blockchain is not a thing. Like the amount of data that goes into real AI models can't fit on a blockchain. And there's no reason to
Mhm.
make it public because of all the things we just talked about for the last 10 minutes. And so
Yeah.
be very wary of AI plus blockchain. But in terms of like high level pitches and stuff like that, because it is really a lot of people are just kind of like trying to hit on the two trends and get money and like trying to maximize them, or VCs will invest in them because now blockchain VCs will invest in you, AI VCs will invest in you, and the mainstream guys that are doing that jump between the two will invest in you. So, as
Yeah.
always, be very wary of companies that are out there.
Yeah. It sounds like so much of VC, whether it's the VCs themselves or their investors, so much of it is narrative driven.
Yeah,
So it for the last while, it has been very Web3 focused, Web3 blockchain, everything. AI it's shifted to AI. Um, but I think, and I
and
can
that tells you why
understand
like
why.
storytellers, people like the WeWork guy, like who are good
Oh
storytellers,
yeah,
end up like
Adam Newman and
raising money, failing, and then like raising money again on an absolute like insane idea. Like it's because they're good. It's because they find ways to fit their story into the narrative, and they find ways to be really good storytellers. And it's it's a part of VC that's really interesting.
yeah, that is fascinating. And I think, I mean, it's you can see why that's the case because anyone, like my grandma, could look at an image generated in Midjourney and be like, "That's
Yep.
incredible," and it
And
is, right? It
it
is.
is. Yeah.
But like, if you dig deeper and you think, "What's the problem that we're solving?" And I would argue that not that many people have this problem of creating images out of thin air, right? And
Yeah.
maybe content creators, and
Content creators and
it'll
Hollywood.
evolve. Yeah, in Hollywood. Whereas with blockchain, it's like, what are the problems you're trying to solve? You're trying to
There's going to
solve
be
the
a real
problem.
world in like a couple of years where you're like, you open up Netflix and you're like, hey, I just want to watch a movie that's like riffing on Star Wars, but 1,000 years after
Yeah,
Star Wars, and just like you just like make something for me, and then it just makes you a movie and you
yeah,
watch it, and if it's really good, then it goes viral and stuff like
yeah,
that. I mean, it's going to be
which
crazy. But
is
yeah, no,
awesome.
yeah, which
Like,
is awesome.
it's interesting, exciting, whereas, like, I feel like you just look at finance, right? Most people don't understand traditional finance, and so it's like, well, I don't understand how, like, traditional finance is broken or, like, remittances. I don't
Mhm.
understand.
You intuitively understand this tax that is being put on you by financial systems. Like you intuitively start to dislike your bank, not because it's not necessarily something you could always point at directly, but you just start to kind of intuit this issue, and
Totally.
so that leads everyone to be very resentful of the system, of the financial system, not just for that, but for the ability to get loans, get access to mortgages, and all that kind of stuff. And so that directly led to blockchain. Of like you have enough people with enough pent up frustration at traditional finance, and suddenly people
Yeah.
want to find different ways to handle all of these problems.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Pat, thanks for coming on here. Always awesome to get your thoughts on just the latest happenings, just in tech in general and VC. And I too, and it renews my enthusiasm for blockchain, and especially what we're doing at Bitwave, right? Because um having an accounting background, like I've felt the pain of like the manual transit, like here's a huge data set, like parse through this. Um Anything that can make that job easier is just a game changer.
Yeah.
Like it's not, maybe it's not as sexy or cool as like, hey, I typed a couple things into a chat bot and it made me a cool image.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like it's saving accountants time so they can spend time with their family, do their hobbies. So
Yep. Yep.
gets me excited.
And getting access to new and getting people access to financial instruments and access they wouldn't have otherwise. And that stuff gets me really excited. So yeah, it's still
Totally.
fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. If you like this video, you want more tips, be sure to hit the subscribe
Smash
button.
that subscribe button.
Smash the subscribe.
Smash that subscribe button.
Pat said
No, we're
it
too
best.
old. We're too old to say that. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah. I know, right? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.